Hello, humans. Welcome to this abrupt sort of plan in the background, not plan in the foreground edition of the Audio Face Severance show. I am Dan. I'm here with Ray.
Hello.
We're fresh off the severed floor from our like actual work lives, truly. And yeah, we wanted to definitely make sure we didn't fall too far behind in the show because it can happen very quickly. But we're like, yeah, we definitely have to do this as a show. When episode 3 came out, Who Was Alive, and then episode 4, the hits keep on coming. This is not an episode to miss. So I'm glad we went ahead and are doing this. But yeah, how are your thoughts? How is this is usually a music channel on the YouTube and stuff, and I've talked about the Kendrick Drake beef for literally 8 years. But I know we were both spending some time at the Super Bowl talking about Severance. What's the word on the street? How the streets feeling it?
The word on the street is that the show is excellent. Also, they've all enjoyed the halftime show as well. So there's that. So people of good taste, I suppose my friends are. But yeah, I loved this episode. I said that the last episode, season 2, episode 3, was the best one yet. I think this one is very close to that in terms of quality and storytelling and cinematography, and just a huge change in scenery for us and for the innies, which I have some theories about. I'm sure we'll get into those in a minute. But yeah, I'm excited to be back. Got quite a bit more season. 6 episodes left after this. So
so they're not hitting us with 8. They're giving us the full 10. Okay.
The full 10. So hopefully some of our questions are answered, and hopefully some of them aren't, because then we'll have 2 years to create insane theories. If the time between the last season, the first season, the second season, is any indicator of how long we'll have to wait for season 3.
I run the government. Apple, take all the people making iPhones and instead have them create Severance. That's how jobs work, right?
Right. I mean, all the recently unemployed people at the Department of Education.
It's like,
hey, for work. So
want to fulfill your dreams of Hollywood? Especially given the horrible situation in Hollywood with the LA fires and people who have already been hit with Hollywood strikes moving out. I can't joke around with also mentioning the realities of that situation, because I'm sure they'll be relevant here and there. So yeah, how we usually do this show is if there's a usual. I think theories is like a segment that'll kind of naturally occur throughout, but we'll definitely do it like near the end. But we'll talk like the general, not like synopsis of the show, but like the setting where you get dropped in the first couple of minutes, and then we'll kind of follow it usually by character. In this case, to kind of get into that, the 4 that we know from MDR are in an Ortbo, which I forget the thing what's like an off, it's basically a retreat, basically.
Yeah. They're on the last retreat. O stands for occurrence. It's an anagram for robot.
Oh, interesting. But yeah, they're in this, wintry nothing space, and they're told by, some of Milchick's light hints, and it seems like versions of the MDR4 who are like slowly and eerily pointing them down. But the premise of this is that they're reading through a book about Dieter Kier, who's Dieter Egan, sorry, he's supposedly like a long lost twin, and more on that later. But you're kind of reading the story about, and Melchick says if you follow in this twin's footsteps, and it's a story about how he's like one with nature, and it's very metaphorical and metaphysical,
literally one with nature if you pay close attention to the story.
One or more with nature.
Yeah. He laid his seed upon the ground. I think what the exact terminology they used was he spilled his lineage upon the grass.
Yes.
Or in the forest.
I didn't have the time to get that. I mean, I got that clip. I didn't have the time to export it because I messed up in halfway through getting it. But you have kind of Irv reading through that piece, and it picks up a lot to, more on that later, because this is kind of, unfortunately, will end up being a little bit chronological. But yeah, you know the clips I have, so I'll guide it a little bit. Really, like the meat of the show, the first 10 or 15 minutes of the episode are when they're just kind of John Travolta looking through the room and the supposed large icy space. The first episode they spend like not even knowing where each other are, and they're just following each other's voice, trying to make an avalanche not happen in the snow. And then they get to a cave, they discover this book that's kind of like helps guide them, and they reach this waterfall, which looks nice for Apple CGI money, but
it's a real waterfall in a state park in New York, upstate New York. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
It's not Niagara Falls though, so the largest waterfall in the world
it is not Niagara Falls, but according to Mr. Milchick, Seth, it is the world's largest waterfall. It's not that big, but hey, to the innies, that is the largest waterfall they've ever seen. Incidentally, it's the only waterfall they've ever seen, but
yeah, I don't even think the Ennies have seen a shower because MDR doesn't require that work.
Right.
Maybe the goat room, but
I would hope the goat room, but based on the state of them, I would say they probably don't have them either.
But after that waterfall scene, Seth Milchick leads the four to their campsite, which is where I have the first clip here. If for no other reason than I also didn't have time to sneak in an Apple TV rarity and classic of a somewhat sex scene between Adam and Ellie. But in lieu of that, I have to have some amount of fun. And this is the scene as Milchick welcomes them after their long journey to their campsite.
Miss Wong has been readying the grill, for which we brought in copious luxury meats.
Miss Wong has been doing child labor in the freezing cold.
And a recital later.
But the copious luxury meats.
Be used for marshmallows and a recital later. The tents, as you can see, are MDR blue. And the outhouse is stocked with 4-ply washroom tissue. Wow.
Me too, Helly. Wow. 4-ply washroom tissue. They're really pulling out all the stops. I'll play a little bit more.
Wow, indeed, Heliar. Also, for your comfort and safety, torches, which can provide both a heat and a light source. Double duty. It's beautiful.
Pretty cool, right?
Yes, lovely.
And that, I think sets the tone where you have these little moments while they're walking through the snow and getting up to that point. Insert Run the Jewels song here. But you have these little bits where Irving is definitely the most off-put by everything. He's very suspicious of everyone, especially Helly, asking what she really saw out there. He pulls Adam to the side and goes, she says she saw night gardeners. He
was right to call her out.
Yeah, it's can you soften up down there a little bit to see that something's not up with Heliar? It's basically Irving saying you're too infatuated or too concentrated on that to really take this objectively. Amy Adams nah, don't worry about it. Yeah, there's some sus things there. You can go ahead, but I have another clip of Irving and Helly in the tent.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say, so you've laid it out. Well, we wake up and Irv is standing out on the ice on this frozen lake. It seems like this in this what we know is a state park, but
Kier National Forest, I believe.
Yeah. Whether or not they ever actually left Lumen is a question I would have, because Irv is out on the ice. Mark says he also woke up on the ice. And we have Helly, who's confirmed in this episode to be, drum roll please,
spoiler alert,
Helena Egan, as we theorized in our last breakdown episode. So she says, but she and Dylan both say they woke up on the cliffs. Now there's tension because Irv has a keen sense of intuition. This is a former Navy soldier, comes from a line of Navy officers. We learned a little bit about him when the overtime contingency was active. And he calls out Helly he asks her to explain to the group what she really saw. He indicates to Mark, hey, what were you talking about? I don't trust her. What the fuck is a night gardener? And he correctly points out that Mark has goo eyes for Helly and that he's letting that cloud his judgment because Mark is usually really perceptive. And I'll just add interesting thing about Mark is that in the last episode that we saw of him, he was being reintegrated by Rugabi. And in this episode, it seems like that is a process that takes time because the Mark that we're seeing in this episode doesn't seem to be reintegrated, or potentially he's pretending not to be. We'll get into it in a little bit later. There's one moment where we see him experience reintegration sickness, but it seems like his Audi and Innie have not perfectly reintegrated yet, so that's fascinating. But yes, Irv, my favorite character and my boy, in this next clip we're going to show, he doesn't back down. I think that you'll see that she tries to give him a peace offering, and just for some context, they come across a dead seal, and Irv, who is very disgruntled by the whole experience, immediately says, "We should eat it."
Hey man. I do love a man who's like, hey, listen, we ain't been fed out here. We know this company ain't shit. Like, you know, of course we're jumping around here, but later on they get to the luxury tent equivalent of a pizza party. Like,
Right.
you know, like we've got
Luxury
luxury meats and marshmallows and 4-ply toilet tissue. Like, you know, he's right to kind of understand this, that, you know, maybe he should be a little bit untrustworthy. But yeah, they see this, it looks like a, you know, carcass of an animal. Maybe it's a seal. Kind of weird to see in a national park with rivers and like no real like lake or like, you know, ocean to speak of. But
right.
hey man, I'm sure there's symbolism some there. Maybe that's a descendant of the spilled seed, if you will.
Could be.
Which we're joking a lot about. No, this doesn't have to do with Mark. But
who also spilled his seed, not just in Dieter Egan National Park, but in Dieter Inner Egan. So
never say that again. It's just like that collection of words makes English sound German. Like it just gauche. It's so bad. But yeah, I'll play this is like a little over a minute and a half, so we can of course like pause as we're going through. But yeah, we're going to watch this interaction here.
Made you a snow seal. In case you were hungry.
Yeah. I feel silly for suggesting we eat that animal. I suppose it sounded alarmist, paranoid, irrational.
It was fine. We were all a little.
What did you really see during the overtime contingency?
I know I'm being alarmist, but let me go back to my original question.
Let me pivot back to the correct point I was making earlier. Let's circle back just to use
yeah, it's like, Helena, I know that you think that this is a corporate retreat for you, but for me, this is Prime Minister's Questions on the BBC, and I'm still talking.
It's question time, bitch. You're in the hot seat.
Piers Morgan lie.
Do you condemn Hamas, Helly?
Okay.
Sorry. No politics.
I told you.
It's okay. It won't change anything.
Oh, two liars.
Irving.
Two bad liars.
Okay.
Very eerie.
He is kind of lying. I mean, I think he hasn't put the pieces together yet. That doesn't happen till his fever dream hits. But because he can't fathom an individual who would have the power to send their Audi to the severed floor. So I feel like he's more suspicious here that she doesn't know, or that she's lying about what she saw because she didn't like the person she was. And the more she refuses to divulge that information, the more suspicious he becomes, because the Helly that he knows is a very straightforward person who doesn't really conceal anything. I mean, he saw her attempt to take her own life to get out of being severed, and she was, allied with them through and through on this mission. So why would she betray them? It doesn't make any sense. And I think that Britt Lauer does an excellent job throughout this first part of season 2, playing a version of Helly playing Helena, pretending to be Helly. But there's just these little moments like there where you see that she's not able to be perfectly authentic in that portrayal. Not the actress, she does a great job, but Helena is not able to accurately portray Helly, just because she hasn't forged these relationships with them that Helly did. She doesn't have the same bond, that she can observe it, but she can't perfectly imitate it because she doesn't really have those bonds in the outside world. So she doesn't really know what it's like to have real friendship, to have these real connections.
In a bubble of her family's creation and like running the family business, right? Like it's different to like go down and roll up your sleeves and rough it with the with the rank and file, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think we were talking about this back and forth, like off of the show, like in our own reactions, that like
I made Dan call me after he watched the episode because I was so flabbergasted at the ending.
I have a feeling that's going to happen a couple times. But it reminded me, and thanks for you co-hosting this with me because I'm bad at remembering other names of characters. But remember when Milchick was being rewarded with the likeness of Egan? You were getting like the blackface Egan.
Blackface
And
Egan.
yeah. And the assistant who was speaking for the board, whose name I'm forgetting,
Natalie.
noted sexist Dan, forgetting. But Natalie, it's like, oh, they gave me the same thing too. And in that moment, you don't really, that Milchick has an awareness of the inside and the outside of the severed floor. Like his severed version can do that. You don't really know the same for Natalie. You can almost assume not, but there's still like some of the best like facial work in the show, like facial expressions between them that like, I don't know how everyone else saw it, but that's a look that Black people give in the office when some weird shit is happening. And they nailed that really well. I was watching like of course like the first time I saw it through, and I felt in the last 2 episodes that the like Brits, the portrayal of the two, maybe it's because like I'm getting smart with the show and I was starting to like get a little bit too ahead of myself, but it felt like that was slipping. But you also have to balance it with she is playing a character who is playing a character of herself. She actually described it really well and brilliantly, and then I started to really see it over the weekend as I was reading about this at the Super Bowl instead of watching the game with the whole fucking person. But Britt describes it as being the same artist and performing 2 different albums that you've done. They're from different time periods and they're from like different eras. And so they'll sound a little bit different, but it's the same type of, person. It's coming from the same person. You can tell that. I think that's how she described her approach to the acting. And, as the music person, I was like, oh, okay, I see where you're cooking. And, there's that expectation of, okay, you have to act like a bad actor, sort of in the sense, because you're slipping. So I think I am ultimately was being too nitpicky in that. And I really like the thoughtful approach to the show overall.
Well, I will
Noted
say
sexist Dan.
I will say that I did think that Britt and Adam, their acting in this episode was off until obviously at the end when Helena is exposed by the brilliant Irv as being a mole, a fucking
Oh, I thought you
plant.
meant that like when Helena was exposed by Adam in the tent.
Oh
Like
God, in
that was better acting.
their Mormon long underwear that they were wearing. But there was like
Sex scenes.
and maybe it was like an indication that reintegration is further along than we've been made aware of, and that's why the portrayal of Mark by Adam Scott was kind of not it wasn't really either outie or any Mark. His behavior, the portrayal of the character was sort of weird. And
A
at
secret
first,
third thing.
right, it was a secret
Yeah.
third thing. And at first I was like, oh, well, maybe it was just because they were filming in this freaking cold location outdoors, very different than the sterile studio that they typically film in. But the more I think about it, the more I think it might be an indication that his reintegration is further along than we were led to believe throughout this episode. Because it's only hinted at in one moment when they're about to have sex for a second time. He looks down at Helena and
Then the block Mark.
he sees Gemma, his wife. So I'm getting ahead of myself though. Let's
Oh, I didn't. Oh, yeah. There's because I unfortunately didn't get a clip, and probably for seizure reasons, it's a good idea that I didn't get the clip of the fever dream that Irving has. But before that, and there's like a piece that I didn't get the clip of, but this leads into. But this is when they're back. We're skipping around the story, but a little bit before they go to sleep for the night and go on their own little separate adventures, if you will. Milchek is reading one of Kier's stories, and yeah, it basically, if you're connecting that thing from the beginning about like spilling the lineage, and you connect the thing about at the end, which is like this weirdly gruesome thing, like his eyeballs fall out and he just like turns into dust, and like I think the sentence was like, this is your punishment for being like having such wantonness, or something like that. I wrote it down because it was so wild. It was like, this is your doing. You suffered his wantonness. Now he's no one's brother, only chaos's whore.
Yeah.
So it's like some really like, gothic poetic shit that Milchek is, speaking of sex symbols in the show, but is really delivering that through. And here's the reaction that the four have here. And here's another sort of tell that you have someone here who Helly's rebellious, but Helena just straight like has no idea how to read the room in this case.
Did his brother really die that way, Mr. Milchek?
The handbook enriches our work with tales of the founder's life. Every word is truth. Helly.
What?
Helly R.
You guys, he melted, right? He turned into the forest because he masturbated. I mean, seriously, that's actually the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Right? He jerked off in front of his brother, and he got punished for it.
What can you say that?
He just said it.
Adam's like, that didn't happen. Milchek is just like dead eye serious.
You know, we often laugh at what we don't understand. The team I thought I knew would have processed more thoughtfully.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, Helly would not have laughed in that moment. After Milchek left for the evening, they probably would have broken down laughing then, or made fun of the absurdity of the story. And I think that there is some truth to it from Helena. I mean, she was raised on these stories. This might be her first opportunity to say, "Yeah, that story's fucking bullshit. Are you kidding me?"
Or it's like goes back to, I think it could even go back to she's seen, it's like, oh, these are the stories, but we just tell the rubes this, right?
Right.
This is how the bread is made. Obviously, you're in the rich family. There could be that dynamic of she's reacting that way because we know for a fact that she doesn't like her Audi and she doesn't like that existence of her, like, right? Or at least her Annie doesn't. So that could be that moment of that coming out, which is another tell, especially when you look in retrospect, that this is not Helly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what comes immediately after this, though, I
have
think.
that.
Okay. All right. Well, then I won't. I'll just let it play. No need to
Let
set
it
up
rip.
because it does
Yeah.
follow back to back. So more antagonism between her and Irv.
Yeah. The only thing I was accidentally playing with my camera, so the ding like came in here. So that's why I cut it into two. I mean, I'm a good producer. So what you see is Little Miss Child Labor being asked to get the marshmallows. And
Cast
then
them into the fire.
Ominous music starts.
Throw them in the fire.
Mr. Milchick, come on.
Now, Miss Wong.
Why?
Marshmallows are for team players, Dylan. They don't just hand them out. Good night.
Miss Wong's like, you know you done fucked up, right?
No fucking marshmallows for you guys.
She's like, I wanted one shit.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Dude, what do you think his dick turned into?
I kept that last look of Irv because he's just like, any Irv is definitely an Audi Irv, or definitely like hard ass, like by the book, straight up people.
Yeah.
But yeah, Irv might have been the last one to joke or the first one to scold if this had happened after, like, yeah, this had happened after Milchick left. But in front of Milchick, yeah, it just goes to show that, like, I don't even know. I don't think Helly knew exactly, like, oh, how much does am I supposed to really be incognito and play along with these sort of stupid things? Yeah, she's seen the outside. She is the one who's like closest to being the puppet master, but here she has to play as the puppet and she really can't.
Right. I mean, she has so much more pull in the company. I mean, she's been groomed since birth to become the CEO.
Nepo baby.
Right. And so to have to sit there and pretend to be a subordinate of Milchick, and let's face it, I mean, Helliar was willing to question authority and push it as far as she could for some time. Up until the point where she, one, has to go to the break room and suffer Milchick's wrath, and then two, after she attempts to take her own life to get out of this severed state, and her she has to come back. She tries to cut her hand off and her Audi tells her that she's not a person. She didn't become more docile, but she played the role of subordinate a little bit better. I mean, we saw at the music dance experience, she participates, she puts on a smile, picks defiant jazz, whatever. She'll play the part that she needs to because she's doing the work behind the scenes to take down the company now. She doesn't have to be so boldly defiant in their faces. But Helena doesn't know that because, again, she sees herself as, Kier's chosen one. Praise Kier, whatever. She is going to be the head of this company. She controls so much power. She speaks on behalf of the board without needing its permission. She is Lumen. So
yeah,
she's
able to hire and fire
yeah.
Kobelvig. Yeah. I think the other thing too is that, yeah, she's all those things, but she's also, which is wild, if you take the sort of like propaganda that we've been given for series 2, she's the face of Severance along with the other 4 in public of
Yes.
like, okay, we know what you saw was weird, but first of all, you didn't see that. You didn't see anything. Like, penguins of Madagascar style. And then second of all, like, what you did see was actually hey, the ice is making me think of it. But no, like,
Crazy reference.
I dropped a Back in the Barnyard reference on a power report one time, and someone was like, "Go to jail."
Dude, that's awesome. Hell yeah.
But fun fact: the creator of that and Jimmy Neutron got a 1-hour special on NBC in the '90s called Bob. Or something like, I think something.odenkork.com, or like his actual name. I was confusing with Bob Odenkirk and the actual one, the more famous one. Oderwork. Sorry, but it's a very surreal 90s sketch comedy show with mixed animation. That's like this. He animates himself into a 3D character that looks like proto Jimmy Neutron. And you have to imagine that the NBC executives were like, great, this is an up and coming comedian. He writes for a lot of shows. This is going to be good. And they saw it and they were just like stunned. And then like literally kicked him out the next day.
Ooh.
It was very, very like raunchy and weird. And like,
Okay.
it was off the beaten path in a good way, like in the way that people kind of respect Conan O'Brien and what he was doing in the 90s. Taken to the extreme. This is less like a Conan O'Brien, I have a job. This is a, I can't believe they let me in the door. I'm gonna do as much as I can before they kick me out.
Right.
Yeah, but not sure how we got. Oh yeah, we're doing random references. But yeah, we were talking about Helena and how she's the CEO, but she's also the face of Severance, and how, at least as far as the Ennies know, it's being taken into like it's a positive thing, and you have more freedoms because we want to be more accountable, which you don't really believe, but at least they do have those freedoms to walk around in different rooms. They don't seem to have been punished yet compared to the last season. So I think there's still that balance that Audi Helena like doesn't understand, kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah. Let's take a second just to talk about these like pretend freedoms, right? Because and we'll finish out the rest of the story after this, but I already mentioned the fact that Irv outs Helena as being a mole. But when you think about the rewards that they're given, their incentives in season 1, and we talked about this last episode, we can really think of the innies as children, right? They have innate knowledge of the world technically, but no experiences.
Can I say something out of pocket?
Yes.
You could really think of MDR as Doge. like the Ennies, they're kind of Doge. Like it's just like fresh out of college or high school tech bros who like they're good at their pounding the keys and making apps happen sort of job, or like passable enough, right? But they're just malleable enough and just like brain-wise manipulable enough to be able to be perfect sort of pawns for the company, right? Like it's no politics.
Hopefully none of them created websites to host child porn prior to going to Lumen, unlike the actual.
We don't know what those numbers and boxes I mean. Those could be ages, man.
But yeah, so like thinking of them as like, these sort of fresh new people, the incentives in the first season that we see for them, it's like finger traps and like character portraits, like stupid gifts that you might get with your Chuck E. Cheese tickets. These are geared towards the childlike nature of these individuals. But we see as they forge these bonds and as they mature that those incentives are no longer successful, right? The idea that this stupid finger trap is going to motivate them to finish the product is not enough. So we see them now bring in these reforms, the hall pass, bobbing for apples. Still, it's not enough for Dylan, who's had a taste of his outside life. And then we see Milchick introduce new incentives for him, which is spending time with his family. This whole Ortbo, in my opinion, is an extension of that, right? They are growing. These kindergarten prizes aren't enough for them. They need to graduate to middle school, and we'll take them out on a field trip, essentially. I'm not entirely convinced that this wasn't just a set created by Lumen and they were never actually in the outside world, but that's neither here nor there. But what I think is going to be really fascinating now with Irv, and we'll get into this in more detail in a minute, but at the end of the episode, they essentially kill any Irv, terminate him, maybe in a permanent way with his severance chip. We're not sure yet. But I want to see how any incentives will motivate them in the future. I mean, Dylan is depressed. He's going to be so distraught that if he had just listened to what Irv was saying, that maybe it could have gone down differently. So will the family incentives even work on him anymore? I would say probably not. But it is fascinating to get to watch these people who are like adults in their mid 40s sort of have to grow up and graduate from childhood to adolescence, experience their technically first sexual experience, although I would say that it was technically sexual assault, as Mark did not know that he was sleeping with Helena and not Heliar. More on that later.
Apple
yeah,
TV's
I think
The Morning Show.
But I really just think that that as these macro data refiners grow up, the company is sort of losing their grip on them, and they're going to start throwing out more outlandish ideas of how to present them with some sort of incentive. Where they try to tell them this storybook fairy tale about why you shouldn't jerk off. That doesn't really go over with them. They're too old to buy into
Don't jerk
that.
off in the workplace.
Right.
Twice. No, that's just like I was also thinking in Dylan's, didn't he get like one reward where he got to go to this special room that was like similarly like Kier-esque statues? Like they've definitely
Waffle
always
party.
Yeah, they're definitely and wasn't there like some like sort of like massage?
He was going
after
to
that
have
too?
sex. So the 4 dancers, 3 women and 1 man, from what we could tell, come out in masks representing the different
Inclusive.
the
Tempers.
4 tempers, and he puts on a Kier Egan mask and lays in Kier's
Yeah.
replica bed, and he runs out to activate the overtime contingency. But obviously what we can assume is that he was gonna get to fuck them, and that this has happened before, because that was not his first waffle party.
Jesus Christ. Yeah. Lots of layers, lots of rewatchability in this show that we'll get to do, thankfully. Yeah. I really like your theory overall with like elementary, middle, and high school and having to tailor the ideas to what each of them individually want, right? I just wonder, like, it's an unstoppable force, immovable object sort of situation where they're gonna keep wanting the moon, and Lumen's gonna be like, well, we're not gonna create a moon for you,
Best we
but
can do is a pizza party. Oh, you guys want raises and better working conditions? Best we can do is bobbing for pineapples.
best we could do is high quality meats and 4-ply toilet tissue.
And then whatever freaky ass instrument they had Miss Huang playing while he was reading the fairy tale book.
Okay, that is I forget, but it's a real instrument that you actually play by hovering your fingers over this thing, and it's like really amazing and pretty, and I forget where it's from, but I was like, okay, that is eerily a good choice of an
A
instrument.
theremin.
Theremin, yes. So it is a real instrument, but I was like, okay, yeah, I think that's an appropriate instrument because it's definitely eerie. I think they use certain pieces of it throughout, as you know, like dramatic tones throughout the show, throughout this episode, at least for sure. And yeah, I think it's an organ would be a little bit too comical. But something of that size and that magnitude, I think playing it like that, and the sort of subtle elegance that kind of like Lumen things have, what's retro futuristic. That's a good choice. Again, apparently this isn't the music podcast right now, but I was a fan of that. Anyway, should we get to the goods?
Yeah, let's get to the goods.
Oh,
So
sorry, really fast. We should mention the lucid dream that Irv has that makes him go sicko mode. Could you go into that?
So yeah, absolutely. So after the marshmallows are thrown and we see Miss Wong and Milchick leave, again, more evidence for me that this is just a set designed by Lumen, is that they are able to just leave. They don't have their own tents set up, so where the hell are they staying? And anyway, I'll get
Where's
more
Miss Wong's radio?
right. So
Would it be so wild if Miss Wong was like, kill him now?
Shoot that guy.
just knowing that Miss Wong has the killed, that definitely changes office morale for episode 5.
But yeah, so immediately after they leave, there's another altercation between Helly and Irv sitting around this fire. Irv confronts her again and says, "Tell us what you really saw. Night Gardener? That's fucking bullshit." And everyone jumps on him. They jump down his throat. They're even Dylan, who is his best friend, which really hurts Irv. You can see that in his reaction to it. And he accuses again Mark of having goo eyes for Helly and that impairing his judgment in this situation. But Helena says, guys, it's okay. We all know that Irv is just upset because he can't see Bert anymore. And that was a horrifically harsh thing to say. And it upsets Irv. He gets up and walks away and goes into the forest. He says, fuck you guys, literally gets up and walks into the forest and starts yelling for Mr. Milchick. And it's at this point where we see Helena and Mark getting it on, and it's flashing between the scenes of them getting hot and heavy in their Mormon long underwear with Irv trekking through the woods. And at the point where they're actually about to start having sex, we flash over to Irv again, and he trips and he falls, and his torch goes out, right? It falls into the snow, it goes out, and he leans up against a rock and falls asleep. Now, he then, the next time we see him, the forest surrounding him is no longer lush. It's all dead and dried up. He's wearing his Lumen work attire. He's got his access card or whatever around his neck, his lanyard. And he sees in the distance this desk setup of MDR and approaches the computer, which the screen isn't black, but it's inversed and it's white with black numbers as opposed to the way that it's usually black with white numbers. And he sits down. It's surrounded by flies flying around the computer screen. And his cubicle wall comes down. Bert is sitting across from him and waves and smiles. Irv smiles back, and he goes to sorting his macro data and looks over to where Helly would be sitting and sees the gaunt bride from the story of Dieter Egan. This half bald.
That's basically like the that's supposed to represent the temper of like
Whoa,
yeah.
Yes. So he sees her, and she
which is also kind of funny because that would also be represented in Dylan's waffle party as one of the 4 tempers too.
Yes, it is. The gaunt bride. Now he looks back at his computer screen after looking at her. The numbers start to rearrange and they turn into letters, and he sees Egan written across the screen, and Helena's face appears briefly on the screen before the gaunt bride jump scares us right next to him, and he wakes up and he's back in the woods wearing his Russian winter garb.
Parka.
Yeah.
You're in Chicago, you should know these.
And he gets up and starts walking away. And this leads up to, he walks to the pond with the waterfall, and who does he find there but Helena?
Yeah, and I didn't it was a lot of a full scene. I want to encourage
Yeah.
folks to like definitely watch the scene because it's definitely really compelling. And it's again like we could do this the easy way or the hard way kind of mode with Irving. And yeah, like I think Irving's last question before he crashes out is just like, how are you able to go between the outside world and the inside world?
Well, we get to hear the existential question of the show repeated to her, which is, who are you? Which is the first line we ever hear in the show. It's the last line we heard in the episode previous to this.
It's the book, The You Are.
Right. It's this overarching theme about what is a person. But what makes him come to this realization isn't just the dream. He looks at her and he says, what you said at the campfire, that was cruel. Helly was never cruel. Showing that he knows that she's not Helly. And he says, who would have the authority to send their Audi to the severed floor? At which point Helena looks at him somewhat apologetically and says, just, I'm sorry. And that's when the scene kicks off. He yeets her, grabs her by the hair.
A real HR blasting episode, right? Like,
yeah, human resources is pissed.
Everyone's going to the break room after this. You have to just like bring Irving's corpse out the side.
Oh God. Just to be clear, guys, Irving is still alive as far as we know. Just his innie was terminated.
I mean, yes, but it would not be the first time that an Audi who is asking too many questions about Lumen mysteriously disappears.
Right, that's definitely on the horizon, and it'll be so exciting to see what they do with Irv's Audi in the coming episodes. Pray he does not die. That's my boy, Irving B.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. The last clip is, this piece where...
Look! Mr. Milchek! Mr. Milchek! What?
Hey!
Turn her back, Mr. Milchek!
What are you doing, man?
Turn her back!
What the fuck?
She's an Audi!
Hey!
Let's go!
Stop!
She's been an Audi the whole time! Ever since she came back!
Irving! You stop! No! Stop it! Irving, stop this!
She's a fucking mole!
What are you doing?
I'm gonna kill her, Mr. Milchek! She's not Helly! She's an Egan! Turn her back, Mr. Milchek! Turn her back!
God damn it, stop doing!
Yes! Do it, Seth!
That line is so excellent. God, yeah, Seth. The malice with which he says Seth is so phenomenal, so cathartic for us as
Seth.
the audience.
Speaking of evoking the Super Bowl, it's like that looking at the camera when you're addressing them when you're angry. It's
Hey,
that,
Drake.
yeah, exactly. I was also thinking of another lyric from the recent album, Kendrick. If you crash out, you better break the backboard. And this is exactly what Irving did. It's like, okay, you went like 100 out of 10, and you're like, okay, let's test this theory and see if there are no rules. I'm going to kill the future CEO of the company, who's real and who isn't.
Full well knowing that this is going to be the end for him. So
Yeah,
we don't know how much time has passed between Mark being reintegrated by Rugabi and when
the first time.
And when this happens. It could be months, it could be weeks, it could be a day. We really don't know. And it seems like Irv has been plotting and planning, waiting for the moment. He was hoping he could get the team on his side, but he realized, I have to go it alone. I have to sacrifice myself to save these three people, including Helly, who I love dearly. And we'll see how much he loves her at the end of this clip. I think it's very endearing And just shows what a bad bitch Irv is. He loves his, and this was a guy who is so by the rules, a real believer in all of Kier's bullshit, all of Lumen's nonsense. He, loved the core principles. He read the appendixes, I think is what
he would cite them like the Bible.
Right. And that's how him and Bert bonded and their love grew. But yeah,
they literally kept a Bible's distance from each other, which was like a Kier handbook when they would not make love on the separate floor.
I mean,
And,
I think that one part that motivates him to be willing to do this is that in Irv's mind, there is an afterlife where even if he's terminated and he's taken away, any Irv ceases to exist, he sees this as a way that he'll get to be with Bert, the Bert that he knew and he loved at Lumen on the severed floor. So even if he dies, he gets to 1, save his friends, and 2, see the love of his life again. And he was willing to give up everything at the beginning of this season, and it was only Dylan that convinced him not to go. And we know that he found out about the exports floor, whatever it is, through Felicia at O&D.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that he's been doing some serious investigative work on his own. And I think that there's a hint in the scene that he directs towards Dylan, but I'll let you play it and then I could dive into that a little more.
Yeah, I definitely to highlight that contrast of like he starts season 1 barely wanting to venture outside of the MDR room, and then like by the middle of season 2 he's like holding up that notebook and drawing he has of the dark room, and yeah, the elevator. I think that's what we find out is the elevator for the exports floor.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he's got this map, so it's wonders what does Dylan know, and what is Adam, any Adam integration Adam and Helly, whatever Helly seems to look like, because I know they're not going to again, it's like unstoppable force, immovable object. How far will Lumen go? Will it even mean like messing with any Helly to psychologically torture Mark and Dylan again? I don't know what could happen, but yeah, I'm down to finish this clip out. Also, last thing, surprise, like, oh shit, Milchek back here. Great acting again. Like that's great, like facial sort of like, just like, oh no, oh god, over here. Right. Everyone's here is just like top of the line.
My boss is getting drowned right now by someone directly that I supervise. What does this mean for me? Even if he doesn't really care that much about what happens to her individually, it's like, oh fuck, my career is on the line. And
now that you mentioned, so I was gonna say, like, now that you mentioned that just brought to my reminder that didn't we like end a scene where Helena on the outside is trying to get Selvig to come back, and the only way she will is if she gets to work on the severed floor, because she is also a true believer, specifically in Mark's work and the work at MDR. And so if Milchek's on the line and no longer gets to run this, like, this is a pretty big gray mark on the management thing. This is this is gonna come up on the mid-year.
He's not getting his bonus this time around.
No special
It's Milchek. Remove the Glasgow block now. No! I'm sorry.
Okay, we can pause for a second.
I'm sorry, Helly.
He says, I'm sorry, I love you, I'm sorry, Helly.
This moment literally had me in tears when I was watching it, because he has forged such bonds with these people that he works with. Like, they're his entire world, pretty much, them and Bert, and Felicia to some extent. And like, he was willing theoretically to risk her life, to risk Helena's life, to save his friend. And can you imagine from Helly R's perspective, last thing she knows, she's on stage at the gala breaking the news of Severance and the issues of it and the torture that they were forced to endure. And then she comes to, and she's in water, being drowned, pulled out by Irv, who's now cradling her and telling her how much he loves her and cares for her and that he's so sorry. And it's just such like a
Real
meaningful
Dick Cheney
moment.
Irv right there. I'm sorry to ruin it, but it's like, Helly, it's okay. We were just simulating the sensation of drowning. That was not what you think it was.
Not Irv being trained at Abu Ghraib.
It's for your own good. It's for the safety of all of us.
We tortured some folks. But I mean, he had to do
You're
it.
talking about a heartfelt moment.
If he had not,
Ray, hey, promises made, promises kept. Yeah.
they were advanced interrogation techniques. They were not.
We didn't know whether or not Milchick or Miss Wong or even Helena had weapons of mass destruction, so we had to stop somewhere.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Codename Operation Shock and Awe.
No, but it was like, that was an interesting thing because I didn't have the captions on either time I watched this episode, but I think it was like remove the Glasgow block.
Yes.
So I think that, so there's something in Lumen that's not the answer to the we are, right? Or whatever that Irv was asking, but there is something in Lumen where an Audi can live on the severed floor.
Yes.
And it's a brain implant that gets triggered by the elevator. So there must be some thing that can happen, or some room you're in and some procedure that is called the Glasgow block. And that allows you to do it.
So during the overtime contingency scene, right before the last episode of the last season, when Dylan is in the security room scrolling through to find overtime contingency, Glasgow is one of the other names on that screen that he scrolls by. So again, very big brain planning ahead shit from the writers. Phenomenal job to them. All props to them. AI could never ever create anything as meaningful and as intricate as this show. But yeah, so now we know that they must have hired someone to fill in the hole left by Mr. Grainer after he got absolutely murked by Rugabi.
Mogged.
She beats him to death, and then she starts mewing like
fragged.
But yeah, so it's one of those things that's controlled by the security room. There's a bunch of other things listed on there, one of which is Lullaby that I keep coming back to. It's been so stuck in my head because I really think that that's like a way to put them to sleep as innies, where they don't wake up until they are activated, essentially. But anyway, yeah. So
I wonder if it does that for Audis.
Yeah, that would be interesting too, because if they were, theoretically, they're on this Orpo, they're supposedly in this national forest. How did they get there? How did their Audis get there?
Yeah, if their innies are on the outside, that does create the idea that you could have multiple of the cells in there, which would kind of make sense with like how you had the innies pointing. There's the twin kind of idea there that's happening. So I think they're playing around with a lot of, many theories to get us going for however many years. You said 2 years for this. Yeah.
I will just say before we wrap up, thoughts for the next episode. My biggest fear, because Irv is my favorite character, is that because after this, essentially, I don't know if there's another clip, but
that's all I have for this episode.
Okay, so Milchick tells Irv to stand up. He tells him to walk into the forest. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out his walkie-talkie, which when I was watching, fully convinced was a gun, and that he was about to old yeller him. He was about to of mice and men him. Look out over the pond, and then
walk into the forest. Don't look back at me. And he says something like, "May Kier's mercy guide you through the darkness," which I think is an interesting contrast to like, does Irv believe there's an afterlife where he will like be reunited with Bert?
Right. And he also says, well, your desk will be cleared out, all of your personal belongings destroyed. It will be as if you never drew a breath upon this earth. All of your personal interactions will be erased or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Which for me was a really concerning line, because is it going to be that they have, again, something in the security room that where they're able to erase the memory of Irv from the other employees? I mean, I hope not. That's a theory that I am praying is not true, because I feel like his leaving the office is going to have such a profound impact on all of them. But the one thing I wanted to highlight is that right before he walks out into the forest, he looks up at Dylan, and Dylan says, "Irv, I'm sorry. I should have listened to you." And Irv says, "It's okay. Just remember, hang in there." There's a poster in the newly revamped break room of Dylan with his arms outstretched, holding the two ends, the two flips for the overtime contingency that says, "Just hang in there." And we know Irv very well. They know Irv very well. He uses weird phrases. He'll say, like, he comes in and says, "Hey kids, what's for dinner?" He says, yeah, he says sort of like these old timey phrases, but "just hang in there" is not something that we would really imagine is in his vernacular. That's not really how he speaks. So I think that he was covertly telling Dylan, "Hey, look behind that poster in the break room. I've left you my research." Something to that effect.
Which would, it goes back to, if there is a memory wipe, there have been instances and moments throughout all of this where the innies are trying to remember what the outies did. The outies are trying to remember what the innies did. There's this fun TikTok meme where it's like, "So your outie got like real shit face last night," or whatever. It's like is messing it up. Or someone telling like the I forget the room, the therapy room, essentially, right? Like,
Wellness.
Yeah, the wellness room, where it's like please treat all these facts about your outie equally. And then people will do these memes, but it's like, no, your outie is actually a terrible person. Your outie was on Little St. James with Jeffrey Epstein.
Your outie was in a K-hole destroying federal funding for cancer research.
Please enjoy all of these facts equally. No, but I think, so we've seen the capacity for memories to be erased. We've seen the capacity for innies and outies to try to convey memories to each other. We know that there's integration going on. There's different processes. We know that there's a lot we don't know with all of these different systems in the security room, or, even on Lumen proper, or, does Helena open a Lumen laptop and just teleport into the thing? Like, I don't know how it works. But I think, I have a theory there's going to be some more time jumping going on here. So I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, we see either Innie or outie Irv, and not like in a sad flashback way, but like we see him in the next episode, or like, relatively soon. But I think if their brains are wiped, then it will be them trying to remember and figure out, okay, this was left by someone, and maybe it seems slightly familiar or slightly hazy, and then the unstoppable force immovable object thing will happen, and someone will be integrated enough to be like, I'm connecting. So there's this Irv guy that got murked.
Right. I mean, and yeah, with Mark's reintegration, there's a question of how much can they really still affect him if he's merged these two versions of himself. He should still have memories of Irv. We also learned through Irv and his outie drinking coffee, blasting loud music, and painting the same thing over and over and over again. Like, and Irv dozing at work and having images of this paint seeping into his dreams, that there is these sorts of ways that their memories are able to collide, even when they're in their severed form. And I think that one interesting thing is, obviously, sleeping at Lumen is a forbidden offense, as it were, per the handbook. But so the question is, Dylan and Mark got to sleep in these tents, and Helly, but she's irrelevant because she's not severed and she's got the Glasgow block on. So was there something in these tents to prevent them from dreaming? And because Irv fell asleep outside of the tent, he was able to have this vivid dream that put the pieces of the puzzle together, because we didn't really see, we didn't really get an opportunity to see Mark or Dylan get excited about having a dream for the first time or anything to that effect. One, because upon waking up, they're trying to find Helly, they're trying to find Irv from the jump. But yeah, that would be the first time they ever got to sleep. So you think that it would be a more memorable experience for them. So potentially there's some sort of block inside these tents. I mean, he made a point to point out that they were lumen blue.
MDR blue, which
MDR
means,
blue,
whatever
sorry.
special privileges that MDR is getting, then like,
Right.
yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, no,
Just a theory.
that's a really good theory. I think we'll leave it on there because I don't have any like smarter ones, and I tend not
Okay.
to, right? Like this is gonna be a good, this is a good run of 2 episodes. It's a thriller, so I don't know if like the other 2, or I know this is, to be fair, like a slower episode until the latter half,
Right.
but I'm curious if we get some more like storytelling episodes coming up after this to lead up to the finale, because I'm not sure it'd be a run and it would make this the worst 2 years ever. But I'm not sure if like they're just gonna, sorry to keep quoting the Super Bowl, but foot up on the gas this entire season and just keep going like more and more lore and breaking the scene every episode. It's almost like they'll have to, but
I want Kobelvig in the next episode. I want
Mm.
Irv and Bert's Audis to interact, because we know we're getting more of that from the trailer. I want some answers
now
on Mark's,
Kith.
right. I want some answers on Mark's reintegration. But honestly, what I want most is the Kobelvig storyline, because I find that her background is so shrouded in darkness right now. I think she's such a compelling character, and I think that she could really fuck things up. I'm more interested in her than I am in my theories are so not centered around Cold Harbor, because I genuinely am so fascinated by her and Milchek and Natalie that I've just sort of been stuck thinking about them. I haven't really even started to theorize on Cold Harbor.
No, I think it's fair because like it's questioning, and I know we'll end soon, but like we all the people you described, we know Helly and we know those super deluxe privileges. We know the middle ground, and like MDR is like, a preferred sort of department in this case. But we really, middle management is kind of confusing. We know to some extent they recall interactions, but we know that they play by the book and they know to treat their outies and their innies completely separately. And to act like they're different people. So it's like a certain skill. But they're definitely susceptible to higher powers like Helena. So
Right.
it's interesting. I wonder how, is it Kobelvig thinks that Cold Harbor is something that she can keep her hat on and then like use for herself to like take down Lumen or like compete with Lumen in some way.
Right.
Like,
does it have something to do with her mother? There's so many unanswered questions. Who were the shadow versions of them that we saw throughout this episode, pointing them in the direction that they were supposed to travel to get to the cave?
With really weird looking faces. Like, I don't know if it was weird looking, but it seemed like it was like out of focus, like extremely out of focus.
Right. I will say the actor that played, they're referred to in the credits as Shadow Mark, Helly, Dylan, whatever. The actor that does Shadow Mark was the same figure we saw in episode 1 of this season in the background right after that initial amazing intro scene where he's running to wellness and we see a man standing behind him. Is the same actor in both of those positions. So I think we can make the logical jump that a logical small step that the person we saw standing behind him was this Shadow Mark, this sort of like animatronic Mark. I don't know. I really don't know.
Or like an actor or something. Like, maybe they're just like set players that's just like, yeah, you are in Lumen World and this is a game and you don't even have real coworkers. There's just like, oh, we just like we keep this person around. So they're playing this person in this context and another person in another context. Last thing I really like, when they sever and unsever, that's like a lens change, because you can kind of tell how their like faces sort of like morph and change, but the settings and surroundings with them don't. You get a camera with a new lens and you just like play around with that, and it's just very fun. But I like the touch that they did with Irving's removal,
Yeah.
because it was like the reverse of that, and then the
Fade to
darkness.
black. Yeah.
Yeah,
Complete.
and wasn't it one of the first episodes of the show where the credits are black?
Yeah, so usually the end of the episodes will go to black. The only episode that faded to white was the last episode when we saw Mark reintegrate, which I thought was
That's
a nice
fair.
touch. But yeah, it was right after Milchek says, make Kira lead you through the darkness or whatever, and then boom, darkness. And Irv, it's not just we see him we don't just see this lens. I think the trick they do is they zoom in and they're like walking back at the same time.
Yeah.
We see that happen in reverse, and then we don't see him. We don't hear the ding. We don't see him get unsevered. It's just black.
Yeah. It's called like a vertigo effect or a dolly zoom. I was just like Googling it really fast. But that effect where there's no ding, and the effect where Helly's unseverance, Helly's severance ding is still a different note from everyone else's.
Yeah.
There's details here. It's really good. So many to talk about, so little time, especially on this late night. Thank you, Ray, for making the time to schedule work. See you soon on the next Power Report, or definitely the next Severance, where there's no random games happening on this Sunday. So I hear Apple TV is trying to get Americans to watch soccer, like real football. So God bless them with MLS, but we know why we're here.
Right.
It's Ted Lasso. Thank you all very much for listening and watching. If you're following us on Twitter, don't follow us on Blue Sky instead, so we have more of a reason to use it less and doom scroll. But we will talk to you next time. I need a better outro, but I'll figure it out. Cheers.
Praise Kier.
Praise Kia. Oh God.